How do you buy a house in Australia? Like, what exactly do you need to do? What are the steps involved from start to finish? All of the little nitty-gritty details. How do you do that? Well, those are the questions that I had before I bought my first home. And it was really difficult to find proper information out there as to how it's actually done. Like, what are the little details that you need? The video that I'm going to make today is the video that I wish that I had seen before I had started my process. But anyway, before we begin, hi, my name is Tembi, and if you're new to this channel, if this is your first time seeing me, then hello, welcome. It is nice to have you here. If this isn't your first time, then thank you so much for coming back again. So the first thing before you do anything is you need to actually set the goal of buying a house. And I know you might say, oh, that sounds a bit strange. If you're thinking about home buying, isn't that the goal anyway? Actually, no, you need to actually set it as a goal. Because for me, I always thought I would buy a house. It was something I wanted to do, but it wasn't like a goal that I properly set. So as a result, I wasted a lot of money over the years, spending money on nothing, because I just wasn't focused on it. And I think subconsciously, I didn't actually believe that it was something I could do and it was something I could achieve. The next step you need to do is to obviously save for a deposit. If you kind of have a rough idea of which stage you want to buy in, if you have a rough idea of what type of house you want to buy, what type of property you want to buy, you can give yourself a saving target. The way that I did it was that I was saving, but I didn't have a goal because at the time I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know where I wanted to live. There were just so many variables. So I was just saving money full stop. In order to really save for a deposit, you can get help from parents, help from friends and family, inherit some money. But if you, like me, don't have any of that, then you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to just do some radical things. And the way that I ended up saving my deposit and all of the fees for my house was that I eliminated my living expenses by becoming an agency nurse. For those of you that don't know, an agency nurse is someone who's a contracted nurse for different facilities. And normally as part of the employment package, the facility and the agency pay for either all of your living expenses or they subsidize them. So in my case, I became a agency nurse in Australia, and as part of that, my rent, my water bills, electricity was completely covered for the length of time that I was on contract. And also another thing is that I increased my income by becoming an agency nurse. The next thing you need to do as part of the budgeting is, get rid of your debts. Get rid of your debts. For me, I had a car loan that I just had to save up and get rid of. I think step number 3 that I would recommend after saving, or even whilst you're in the process of saving, is to go and see a mortgage broker. And the reason why I say go and see a mortgage broker is because they are people who can give you a lot more information about which government schemes you're eligible to access, especially as a first-time home buyer. And they can give you just more information about interest rates. They can tell you how everything works. And that was probably one of the best decisions that I made. And then as part of seeing a mortgage broker, you can also get a pre-approval. What I did was that I saw a mortgage broker who told me about the first home guarantee scheme, which is basically where you can actually go and get a mortgage with less than a 20% deposit, and you don't have to pay lender's mortgage insurance. So that's what I ended up doing. I paid a 5% deposit. I think it was almost 6% actually. It was definitely not 20%. It was about a 5 to 6% deposit. The next part was about getting a pre-approval. Now, having a pre-approval is so important because it basically is a way for you to know for sure if you are eligible to get a mortgage. Because the danger is if you go and find a house that you like out there, and then you make an offer, and then you have to scramble to then go and get your finances in order, then you might be left in the unfortunate position that you just are not eligible for that finance. So we agreed to apply for a pre-approval of up to $500,000. And now let's talk about all of the documents that I had to submit as part of my pre-approval process. So I had to send in, they wanted 6 months, oh my God, 6 months worth of all of my bank statements, etc. And I had to submit my ID documents, so that was like my passport, my driving license, and then also my visa, because I'm a permanent resident in Australia. I've got the 189 visa, so I had to submit my visa. Before I forget, another thing I had to do was I had to go to my agency, and then I had to get them to submit all of the contracts that I had worked for the past like 18 months to 2 years or whatever it was. After I submitted my pre-approval, it was just basically like a waiting game. About a week or so later, just after Christmas, I got a message from the broker to say that the bank wanted a bit more information with regards to my application. They wanted one more payslip. So the way that they said was that they needed to see 6 months worth of earnings for this current calendar year, essentially. So from June to December, they wanted to see how much I was going to be earning in total. So I just had one more pay slip I had to submit. And another tip I'm going to give you agency workers out there as well. Make sure you're working consistently. Don't take breaks. If you know you're going to apply for a house, just work consistently. And that's what I did. I did not have any weeks off from June to December last year. I worked every single week, every single day. I had no break. And I think that's what really helped when it came to showing that, look, even though I am temporary, I can have like a consistent income. And then my pre-approval came in, I'm looking at this, I think it's like around January the 14th-ish. Next step was house hunting. At that time, I had decided that I wanted to buy a standalone 2-bedroom unit with some garden space. There were 2 units that had just been finished. I viewed them and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I want. Like, I'm not interested in seeing anything else. Then we go on to part 3 of how to buy a house, which is making an offer. Now, I didn't know how to do this. Okay, I was Googling, how do you make an offer? How do you make an offer in a house? When you're making an offer, you kind of have a back and forth with the real estate agent, but an offer is not valid until it is written down on a contract of sale, which I'm going to go on to in the next part. I kind of had a chat with the real estate agent the next day. He sent me like a little Google Doc form that I could sort of write down my offer on, because like I said, an offer is not valid unless it's in writing. So my first offer was that for 486,000. And then he came back and he was like, no, the sellers was 500,000. And I said, ain't no way in hell I am paying 500,000. My second offer was 490. And then he then came back to me and then he said, the sellers are not going to accept anything less than $495,000. Now, at this point, I wasn't sure if I was in a bidding war with other people. I think because there was like an open home, I assumed that maybe I was, but I just wasn't sure. And then that's when I really just like had to think about it. And I was like, actually, look, at the end of the day, it is within my budget. Yes, I'm stretching myself. I am really stretching myself because I'm going to the upper limits of my pre-approval limit. But at the end of the day, I really want the place. I don't want to do DIY. It's in a great location, great neighborhood. It does fit the brief. So I just made a mental note that 495 was going to be like my final offer. And if they didn't accept that, then I was going to move on. You need to know when to walk away, because otherwise you can be dragged into like bidding wars and then you can end up like overpaying. The next thing I needed to do was to put all of this in what they call a contract of sale document. So a contract of sale document is what it says on the tin. It is where you write down your official offer, and that's where you put down all of like your conditions for the sale. So I didn't know how to fill this in. So I contacted my broker and I was like, how do I do this? The broker said, look, no, you need a conveyancer to do this. what I did was I contacted Goodman and I said, look, hi, I'm a first time home buyer. I want to make an official offer. I don't know how to fill out the contract of sale. What do I do? And then they got back to me within an hour. And then she talked me through the entire document, what I needed to put, exactly how it worked, everything. She was excellent. And then she also followed it up with like a detailed email for how to fill out each section. So in a contract of sale, basically, you fill out how much money you want to offer for the house. So for me, that was 495,000, and then you put in your conditions. So this is the sale based on finance approval. So that's me getting my mortgage fully approved from the bank, and also subject to like a building inspection. All those like little intricate details, you put all of them in the contract of sale. And I highly recommend that you get a conveyancer before to actually review your contract of sale before you fully submit it to the real estate agent, who can then submit it to the buyer. So after filling out my contract of sale, I then sent it back to the real estate agent, and then it was just like another waiting game, because again, this is my final offer. Actually, I heard back that same evening, the real estate agent texted me back and he said, look, your offer has been accepted. Well, I had signed it, the sellers had signed it, so it was now like legally binding. So it was like, oh, it was so exciting. So after my offer was officially accepted, next step is to then send a copy of this contract of sale to your conveyancer and to your broker as well, so that the broker can get started on their part of like finalizing everything with the bank, and then so that the conveyancer can then now get started on like all of like the legal stuff. When your contract of sale is accepted, you then have to put a deposit down, and this deposit is called your earnest money, or like, you know, your good faith money, basically money that shows how serious you are about buying this. Some people put in like their full deposit. I was like, no way I'm doing that, because this is money that you're willing to risk, so that if for any reason the sale doesn't go through and it's your fault, then you don't get that money back. I couldn't really find like a guidance as to like how much money you put in. I saw some people on Reddit saying that they put in like their full deposit, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So I was like, let me just do 10,000, because 10,000 it's a nice round figure. It's not all of my deposit, it's not all the money I have, and it's sort of serious enough, but it's not like low. When your offer is accepted, you have to send that money to the real estate agent, and then it's put in like a separate like real estate agent trust account, and then that money will also go towards like all of your closing costs and everything like that. But one of the conditions was that I had to get a building inspection done, like even though it was a new build. And luckily I was able to like find someone to do it. Like they were able to like come the next day. They had really good reviews on Google and stuff like that, and he was really helpful. I got the building inspected. The building inspection report came back. It was like 25 pages, and then it was just basically like all of the little flaws and kinks that they found within the house. When you get your building inspection back, this is where you can go back to the seller and renegotiate if you need to, if you want some money off, if they found some major flaws or anything. Luckily on mine, all of the things that they found were like minor things, but to me, because I've never been through this experience before, everything just seemed like it was like massive, and I was even considering getting everything fixed and stuff like that. I spoke to my conveyancer about all the stuff I was concerned about, and then she was basically like, she was like, oh, all of those like minor issues. And I was like, what do you mean it's minor issues? It's 20 pages worth of minor issues. She was like, oh, look, unless it is to do with like the foundations or like the roof or anything that's gonna like cause you significant amounts of money, you're never gonna get a perfect house. You are, even if it's a new build, you are never gonna get something that is perfect. And I just sort of decided to let it go. There was like this like minor little plaster crack that I asked them to fix, which they agreed to. And but everything else was like minor things, like nothing major. And then the next step was for me to get my unconditional offer from the bank. There was like quite a lot of back and forth between like my conveyancer and the bank, because this was a new build, but my conveyancer was like taking care of everything like behind the scenes. And then this is when I was hit with like the biggest curveball ever. I found out that I had to pay stamp duty. Originally, I thought I was going to be eligible for the stamp duty exemption, which exists, and there is a stamp duty exemption if you're buying a house that's, I think it's less than 600,000 or something like that. But I found out in Tasmania that does not apply to new build properties. So last minute, I found out that I had to pay $18,000 in stamp duty because the stamp duty exemption did not apply to new builds. And I was like, what the hell? It only applies to like established properties apparently. And I nearly had a breakdown. Like, it was one of the most stressful experiences of my life, and I can smile now, but let me tell you, that was insane. And I feel like my broker should have picked that up, and they didn't at the time. And they were like, oh, we didn't know, we didn't know. And I'm just like, this is why I'm not even naming the broker, because like, I bless them, bless their heart, but I just feel like they did quite a few blunders in this process, and which caused a lot more stress, unnecessary stress. So I'm not even going to bother recommending my broker. The only person I'm recommending is my conveyancer, because if not for her, she was the only person I feel like who was like on it, in my opinion. I decided to still go ahead with the purchase because I decided that, look, this is what I want to do. This is, yeah, I still want to go ahead with the purchase. And after that, the next step was for my unconditional finance to come back. And luckily, the bank approved me. They didn't ask me for any further paperwork or anything like that. They're like, congratulations, you're officially formally approved, and yeah, it's unconditional. So after that, everything had been, all the conditions of the contract had been met, and all I had to do was just wait for settlement. And within that 30-day settlement period, it just kind of quietens down. The solicitors, the conveyancers working in the background. They're working on things like the title transfers, and I was then now getting information about my property, the boundary lines, the council, the sewage line. Like, it was just like a lot of documents. Prior to settlement day, I had to then send in the final, my conveyancer sent me like a final bill for everything I had to pay, which included my deposit, my conveyancer fees, and then also when you're buying a property, you also have to pay things like the water rates, the council rates, everything up until the end of the financial year, because when someone's selling the house, they'll pay all of those ahead of time, and then you just have to reimburse them like for their portion. And I will do a separate video which talks about every single cost when I do a full cost breakdown of everything. Settlement day is basically the day that the seller gets all of their money, basically. And after settlement day happened, I got a call from the conveyancer to say, look, it's all done, you can go pick up your keys. And then, yeah, I spoke to the real estate agent, I went to pick up my keys, and then I was in. So anyway, let me know if you have any questions down below. And like I said, I will do a much more detailed video which talks about the cost breakdown, because I paid a lot of money, okay? It was not cheap to move into here, but that's a story for another day. But anyway, guys, so thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up. But anyway, apart from that, I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.